Morning all. Saturday, long weekend, so I thought, right, I shall do a quick catch up. Well, I'm saying a quick catch up because, as I've sort of said to you all in the past, living in Australia, especially in Perth, nothing much happens. We had a cyclone over east last week, and we had a pretty stormy day a couple of days ago, and leaky roofs, etc. But apart from that, things are pretty mundane. Not much happens. So I like to often take this opportunity just to reflect on my past life. So this week, I really wanted to talk about the early 90s for me. So the first few years of me actually coming out being gay. This was a really, really important time. And the way my life panned out really stems from that period. Now, in 1990, I was working for the civil service. I had a friend called Glyn. Didn't work with him, and I can't even remember. This is how bad it is, really. But because my life was so full of ups and downs of, my sexuality, I forget a huge part of what happened before. Now, I had a friend called Glyn, and I met him when I was unemployed, and back then we were a member of what they called a job club. Now he was probably about 10 years older than me. And this was, I suppose, if I look at it logically, he was a bit of a crush. I don't think he listens or reads my blog, so that's absolutely fine to say. And I'm not going to repeat his surname either, but it was a bit of a crush. So, and I remember we used to get our gyro, which basically was it was like a gyro that you went and cashed at the post office to get your dole money. And at that point in time, I was living at home, so I'd get my dole money, and me and Glyn would go out and we'd get pissed, literally, absolutely, totally blotto. And we spent, really happy times together. And so I'm just having a drink of my tea. And tea's the one thing that keeps me going, actually. And it's my link to Britishness, I suppose. But this is my, what is this one? Metabolism one. So yeah, we'd spend a lot of time together. I went to his house, etc., and I have some good memories. And Glyn was the first person who said to me, "You're gay." In fact, let me show you something. It's just sprung to mind, actually. And I don't know. One of the only things I actually brought with me was, and I don't know if it's going to be here or not. I'm hoping it is. Yes, it is. There we go. So I'm going to try and move this. This cabinet is absolutely full of stuff. It's stuff that me and Daryl have collected on our travels, really. That's what it is. And this is what Glyn gave me when I was 21 years old. Now, it's a penis. It's got the name Gazza, as he always used to call me, 21. And there's a little hole in the back. And it was to hold my last cigarette. Because, like Glyn, I was quite a bad smoker, to be honest with you. Put this back up. And smoking for me was kind of a way of, I don't know, blocking out things, helping with anxiety and stress and all the rest of it. And at the time, I just couldn't bring myself to tell Glyn that I was gay. He knew it, just like my parents knew it, but I didn't have the bottle to say anything, in effect. Around that time, it was just after, I mean, the friendship with Glyn lasted for as long as we were at job club, etc., etc., and then it kind of dissipated, which was a shame because I still hold him in such high regard. He helped me out through some really particularly difficult times, and you know, I do miss that kind of friendship. Actually, I did come across him in recent times briefly, and we sort of had a brief conversation, and then we lost contact again. So it was a friendship that I needed at that time. It clearly wasn't going to last thereafter, which, as I say, is a shame. I had that memory in there anyway. Shortly after that, I met my first, I suppose, proper boyfriend, and yeah, he was my first love. He really, really was, and we kind of lost touch. I think, look, it was mainly to do with me, and sexuality for me at the time was really, really difficult to deal with, and although I, you know, had this relationship, I just couldn't deal with that side of me, and I was still trying to deny it, and you know, trying to pretend I was this other person. You know, I had a pretend girlfriend, and you know, the people who I went to college with, who I did still see at that point, a couple of them anyway, they thought, oh look, I this second life, this pretend life, they never met this girlfriend, but again, it was a protection mechanism for me, and you know, I don't think they believed me. I didn't believe me, clearly, and you know, you have to learn at that point to be a good storyteller. Maybe that's where I get it from, I don't know, but you just do. And remember, the 1980s, growing up gay in the 1980s, 90s were very different to they are today, so you had to hide yourself quite a lot. And you know, don't forget, it was still illegal to be gay 21 years old. So yeah, it was, oh god, it was such a, I don't know, it was a hard time, and it gets me quite emotional, because although, you know, I loved myself, I loved myself who I am, I love being gay, it makes me emotional to think of the bloody difficulties that I went through. Not only me, but other, you know, the people I associated with, and you know, because at that point I started to meet new people. I spent a few years away from education, and you know, so after college, I sort of spent a couple of years out, and you know, I was discovering myself, discovering my sexuality, etc. And then I went to university, and then university in, gosh, when did I go to university? It would probably be 92, I think, 1992. So that's where I really found myself and who I was, and you know, my sexual orientation. I went to Southampton Solent University, and gosh, I think I spent a huge amount of time getting drunk as a student in the student union bar. I think at that point in time it was about 80 pence a pint. A packet of cigarettes were about £1.99 a packet. God, how times change. You'd be able to cash your checks in the little shop in the student union bar, and you know, they were great times. And I met other gay people. And that's when I first sort of went to my first clubbing nights at the Magnum Club, as it was then. And God, I mean, that place sticks in my memory today. I did ask, I mean, I'm on a particular group on social media about that club, if anyone had any old photographs of the outside of the place, because, you know, I don't have any, I know what it looked like, but I need tangible memories. And nobody has. It's weird. I suppose the reality is, back then we didn't have camera phones. We certainly didn't walk around with, a normal average camera in our pockets all the time. We just didn't do that. So records of that period are very limited, which is sad. There was one guy actually called Pete Crossman. I'm sort of jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but he was one person who used to take photos all the time, and he actually got lots printed. He used to work for Boots, and he was in the photography bit where you got your photos done. And yeah, he was the loveliest guy you'd ever meet. Sadly, no longer with us. But he passed on a lot of photos at that time to me, which is why I have so many, a lot more than most. But anyway, that's going off the point slightly. So yeah, there weren't really many records of that time, but I do remember the first occasion going to the Magnum. Now, I used to live at 99 Clovelly Road in Southampton, St Mary's. And it was on the same street as the Magnum Club. The Magnum Club was at the end on the corner. And I remember after a really drunken night, I think I went to Clowns and Jesters, as it was then. I don't even know if these places are still there, but it was at Beavers Valley, or Bevois Valley in Southampton, which was kind of like the next few roads along, really. And so I remember turning up at the Magnum Club, and you used to have to knock on the door, and they would open like a little hatch, and they would look at you, and they would make sure you were okay and you were kosher, and you weren't going to cause trouble, and then they'd let you in. And I remember that, stepping into the Magnum, and it was full of floral wallpaper. You wouldn't get that these days. The old-fashioned gay clubs as they were. And I nearly swallowed that the Twinings bag then. God. But anyway, yeah, it was pink floral wallpaper, and it was, gosh, it was kind of like stepping into my grandmother's bungalow, really. It was quite bizarre. But the nights there were unbelievable. Like, I don't think clubbers today really understand the clubbing nights that we had. I think of myself now from, well, I'm sort of a product. I am a 90s club kid. That's who and what I was from that first moment. And I remember sat in the middle bar. There were 3 bars. There was a really camp bottom bar playing ABBA and all these type of things. And then the middle bar would be like a chill out where you'd have... I just remember sat in a corner on a chair, just trying to recover, smoking a cigarette, because you could smoke indoors then. And then the top bar was more hardcore. So you had this, it was quite bizarre because you had all this floralness and pinkness going on, and then you got to the top bar and it was really, really hardcore. And yeah, it was such memorable times. I had some blasts. As a 90s club kid, I had some blasts. At that point, I also met my next love, if you like. Now, I mean, still in contact with this person, so I don't really want to mention his name fully, but his first name was Martin, and I loved him with all my heart. And I don't, things just didn't work out for us. And this was more of a, not a drifting apart, but this was kind of a, gosh, it was ended very dramatically, I remember. And it was very upsetting for me, exceedingly so. And, you know, I used to spend time at his apartment in Beavers Valley, and he would spend time in my student digs in Clovelly Road. And, you know, we had some great times. Also, we would go to Clowns and Jesters. Now, in Clowns, they used to have a guy, I can't remember his name, I was trying to think of him earlier, but he used to play American folk songs like American Pie and all the rest of it. We used to love all that, and I remember dancing away to this music. And he was great. I think he was called Dave. Was he called Dave? Anyway, so a lot of my circle of friends at that time I met at that point. So it was my first sort of foray into the gay world, etc., etc. There were also other ways of meeting, gay people. There wasn't a grinder, obviously, at the time, so you would you go up the common, you'd go cruising. There were cottages that you'd go to, and I'm not going to go into detail about these things, but this is how you met people at that point in time. So the early 90s for me were about coming out, were about discovering who I was, and it was quite an enlightening time. I had a lot of friends. I was still in the closet where my family were concerned, and I'll go into this in detail in another vlog, but it was my mother who finally asked me if I was gay, but this was well after I'd come out, just after college. Anyway, so yeah, it was the most important period. Now, luckily, as someone who embraces social media, despite the wretchedness of it sometimes, but I do embrace it. I have discovered a lot of friends from that period, and that has been quite, how can I put it? It's been really comforting for me, because I'm living over the other side of the world. I need a connection with people, and I think the connection with those at that point in time are the most important, because they played the biggest role in, making me who I am today. They were a big part of my life, and I miss it. I'm old. I'm 54 in a few weeks, and I miss being young. I miss being young and gay. I mean, look, if you're young and gay today, it seems quite water off a duck's back. It is what it is. Nobody cares. Back when I was young, people cared, Whether they sort of, how can I put it? Whether they were quite angry towards you, whether they were, because look, we had a lot of abuse, don't get me wrong. But there was also a lot of nurturing and acceptance, and, especially when you're at university and the people you go to university with. I didn't always have that experience. I did live with some people for a while in student digs who didn't like my sexuality. And, that was difficult. And that's, when I met my next love, and we moved out to a flat above a shop. And what's the road called? Northbrook Road. I think it was Northbrook Road, I'm sure it was. And he was, oh gosh. We don't talk these days, although we are on social media, and I do like to dip in and out and just see what he's up to. And we did our friendship. Well, it was a relationship which went into turned out to be a friendship in the end when I met my current partner, and the friendship didn't end well and it ended quite acrimoniously. And I can't for the life of me remember why. It really wasn't that important, you know. And this is the friendship I would love to have back, but it's I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't think it's going to happen. The distance between me and friends over in the UK anyway is too vast. But it's just nice having that connection and just making sure that he's okay, and he's certainly okay. You know, I'm the one who was the rebellious homosexual who was clubbing into their 40s. So he did great things with his life, you know, and that's great to see. So the early 90s was an important period. It was the most memorable, the most happy, joyful and special years of my life. And it's obviously when I met my current husband as well. So if I could put that in a box and keep it in there with all those memories forever, I would do that. But I'm constantly looking for those little pointers to that point. And when I am a shopaholic, I look online all the time, and when I see something that triggers a memory, that's it, buying it. You know. Anyway, that's it. I hope you all have a good week and look after yourselves. And it's been great for me, sort of, you know, looking back, reminiscing, as I do way too often these days. So, yeah, look after yourselves. Ciao.